So I thought I'd look at a couple of my influences, guys I really love. Jack Davis was one of my favorite cartoonists from Mad Magazine when I was a kid. I didn't know until later that he illustrated for a lot of other magazines and other publications that I had never heard of. He used to do covers for TV Guide. A lot of magazines and books had illustrations by Jack Davis. That's Jack there. This is the Crypt Keeper from EC Comics and Alfred E. Newman from Mad Magazine. His style was so loose and so funny, so many gags. I've had this book quite a long time. But it's a history of Jack Davis's art. So you see his art from when he was really young, first becoming a cartoonist. And you see his art change as he becomes a professional. And he eventually winds up at Mad Magazine, where he becomes one of the fastest guys there, if I recall correctly. And so much artwork that he did for Mad is just classic stuff. So if you get a chance to see his Mad Magazine work, I highly recommend it. And his horror comics and war comics he did for EC, who published Mad back in those days, was just great. This is kind of a checklist, not a checklist, but a listing of all the work he did. He worked for Kurtzman when Kurtzman did Trump magazine for Hugh Hefner. And then he worked for Kurtzman when Kurtzman did Humbug magazine, his own magazine, self-published. But a great style. He worked for Kurtzman on Help magazine, which Kurtzman self-published again, I think. Unless Warren did that. Then he worked for Warren Publications doing covers, and I don't know if he did too many stories, but he did covers for Warren sometimes. And his forte was sports cartoons. So you would see a lot of sports cartoons done by Jack Davis for various magazines. And he loved the Old West. There's a cover for Ebony magazine with the Jackson 5. So a lot of great artwork here by Jack Davis. Good inspiration here if you're looking for another cartoonist to study, to see which one you like. So he did the poster for an old movie called It's a Mad, Mad World. And that became a style of posters, of movie posters, for a few years. Which is back here somewhere. Because it was early 60s that he did that poster. And Mad Magazine wanted a cover like that for one of their reprint books. So they got Jack to redo it, but they called their book It's a World Mad. The same concept. A bunch of people chasing someone, Alfred E. Newman in this case. So he did tons of ads for different companies. Just great cartooning. His own style of drawing and cartooning. I guess he did the model sheets for the Saturday morning show based on the Jackson 5. There we go, movie posters. And he did a bunch of them. Non-movie posters. I guess they couldn't get permission to use that Mad, Mad World because I don't see it in here. But here's one of his great sports drawings. Huge football player running over the referees. And I just love his sports drawings. So a great, great cartoonist there. Another guy whose work I really love a lot is this guy, Harvey Kurtzman, who was the originator of Mad Magazine. And this book came out a few years ago. (2009) apparently. So when you look at Kurtzman's work, you see this wackiness and the sense of humor that up until then wasn't really in comics, in comic books, but he made it. So this book is a behind the scenes of his life and work. This has been up on my shelf for some years now, and I haven't taken the time to look through it in a while, but he used to do a comic strip, one-page comic strip for comic books called Hey Look. And it would be a setup, gag, and then release. And then I think they were published in Timely Comics by Stan Lee, if I recall. I think that's where they first appeared. So all these great one-page gags that he came up with. And you could do this with your characters. Do one-page gags like this in comic strip form, comic book page form. And then if you want, you can just use those drawings as a storyboard and layout and animate them. Make up your soundtrack based on your dialogue balloons and make your really short film that way. That's one way of doing your short. Do it like a comic strip at first, and then animate it. Because you've got the basic drawings of how you want it to look, so why not? So this is all before he does Mad Magazine at EC Comics. And let's skip ahead to when he finally does get to EC. Oh, this is wonderful. You see his actual thumbnail drawings, how he plans out a comic. And this is his thumbnail breakdowns for a full story. Each one of these is only 2 1/4 inches high. So you plan everything out small first. Get your dialogue placed or what you want it to say, your characters placed on the page. And after that, you can work it up to larger size, but you do the pre-planning like this. And this is just Kurtzman's way of working. Not everybody did this, but this is the way he liked to work. And everything has to be based on your comfort level. How do you want to work to make your project come to life? So here we see his thumbnails for this page, and then down here we see the printed page and how close the artist stuck to the thumbnails. Which in this case, it looks like it might have been John Severin, but I can't quite tell. Or it could have been, maybe it was Johnny Craig. So these are the kinds of things that you do when you want an artist to follow your work. You do thumbnails like this. And if you're the artist, then you have something to base the pictures on, and then you do the final ink page. So as the book goes on, you see more and more of this, because he was such a stickler for how the page should be laid out, what should be on it. You see some of Jack Davis's work. Here's an example of doing Flash Gordon. His thumbnail roughs, you hand it off to the artist, and the artist does the finish. So in this case, I think Dan Barry and sometimes Frank Frazetta were doing the finished drawings. And you see how they change things. Like this guy is facing 3/4 in that guy's profile. The finished artist decided to put him facing camera and this guy 3/4 looking at this thing in his hand. Here's a crazy, wacky 2-page spread, college life. There's a cover that Kurtzman did for the Two-Fisted Tales, number 28. There's a story that he did, Airburst. There's another cover he did for Frontline Combat, number 7. Here's a story that he actually wrote and drew, Corpse on the Imjin, about 2 soldiers fighting and one has to kill the other one. And now we get to Mad Magazine. Here's his cover concept for the cover of Mad number 1. And he actually did a drawing and then he did a light color on top of it. So here's the finished printed cover. And let me get this book out of here. Here's a Jack Davis cover for Mad number 2. Kurtzman cover. Here's Kurtzman's thumbnail and finishes on top. I guess that's Wally Wood drawing on top of Kurtzman's roughs. Basil Wolverton cover. Mad Magazine was so great. What is this? These are the thumbnails for Super Duper Man, which was a takeoff on the Superman comic book that he did, where Superman fights Captain Marvel. And here's the finishes by Wally Wood. And you can look at the pages and compare what did Kurtzman draw and what did Wally Wood draw. So this would be page 2. Here's page 2 that Wally Wood did the finish on. So you get to compare and see what got changed as it went on. But a great story. Here he's fighting Captain Marvel, who has a $sign on his chest. And Lois Lane still doesn't like him. Here's various covers. This is where he did a takeoff on Blackhawks, which was a very famous comic book back in the 40s. And those are his thumbnails. Here's the finished pages by Wally Wood. More Wally Wood, a 3D story there. Wally Wood was probably one of the greatest comic artists that ever lived. So here, he quit Mad, and Hugh Hefner said, I'll give you your own magazine called Trump. And I guess they did 2 issues of Trump. It failed, so Kurtzman did Humbug magazine. And here's some of the covers and artwork for that. And I guess that lasted a few issues, a bunch of issues it looks like. There's some preliminary drawings for different things. Marley's Ghost. It was an adaptation of A Christmas Carol. And those are his thumbnail drawings for it. Just one of the great, great artists of comics whose work I love a lot. His take on cars. He did so many things. Decadence Degenerated from the Jungle Book that he did, which was about the publishing industry. This must be The Grasshopper and the Ant or something. He did an adaptation of that, his take on it. So I'm pretty sure this book is still around, that you can find it. Color comps for a story. Double page spread of Goodman Beaver. This is Goodman Beaver. Covers from Help magazine that he did. Satire and Technicolor. So at some point he got the job to do a comic strip at Playboy called Little Annie Fanny, which was very very funny. And Kurtzman would do the writing and the rough layouts and hand it off to Bill Elder, usually, who would do the finished paintings. So here we see tracing paper rough that Kurtzman did. Looks like it's on some kind of graph paper. And then the next page are the color suggestions. And this one is tracing paper. And we see all the drawing that he would put into it and all the writing and the placement of the balloons and everything. And then it would get a little bit more finished. So much detail, so many little gags there. And then it would go to Elder to get finished painting. So you see there's a lot of work you can put into these things, into comics and animation, to make your gags work, get your vision across. Harvey Kurtzman Index, I have that somewhere around here. But he works on the preliminary stuff so much because he wants it to be just right. And there he is, the man himself. Ladies and gentlemen, Harvey Kurtzman. So, another great book, The Art of Harvey Kurtzman. Get books that inspire you. Take them out from the library, it's cheaper. Get them used at the used bookstore or the thrift shop. Keep drawing, keep writing, and keep having fun. We'll see you next time.